Hello everyone, this is Manohar Reddy, Department of Cybersecurity, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today in this session I am going to discuss about query processing in DBMS. Query processing in DBMS. So how the queries are evaluated, and based on the evaluation what as the result will be displayed on the database management system. So query processing. So what is meant by query processing? So query processing is the way database management system parses and validates. So it parses, it validates and optimizes the given query before generating a low level code understood by the database. So query processing is the way of database management system that parses, validates, optimizes the given query. So it validates, it parses, it optimizes the given query. So whatever the commands, whatever the queries we are given on the DBMS, so that all the queries will be optimized, parsed, validated. So before query generating a low level code that understood by the DBMS, that understood by the database. So like any other high level language, where code is first compiled and then executed to perform different actions. Query processing in DBMS also comprises of two phases. So compile time and run time. So all the different languages are compiled first and then next runs second. So compiled first, then runs second. So the same way DBMS also comprises of those two phases. One is what? Compile time and run time. So one of the types of DBMS is relational database management system. One of the types of DBMS is what? Relational database management system, where data is stored in the form of rows and columns. Where the data is stored in the form of rows and columns. So data is going to be stored in the form of rows and columns. In other words, it stores in tables. So what exactly table contains? A table contains rows and columns. So it indirectly says that what? The data is stored in the form of both rows and columns, which have initiative associations with each other. So rows and columns both are initiative associations for each other. So here the query processing is the way DBMS parses, validates, optimizes and given query before generating a low level code understood by the DBMS. So it's also having the two phases like other languages. So compile time and run time. So those two are the basic phases that every language should process. The users, both applications, the users are nothing but what? Applications and humans have the liberty to select, insert, update and delete these rows and columns without violating the constraints provided at the time of defining these relation tables. So whenever we are creating the tables, at the time we are creating constraints also. So the users have the liberty to select, applying all these commands like select command, insert command, update command and delete of all these commands to update the rows, to delete the rows, to insert the rows, to update the rows, to select the rows, and for everything without violating the constraints that are provided at the time of defining the tables. So let us say, we'll see, want the list of all the employees who have a salary of more than 10,000. So this is the query, and how this query parses, how this query validates and how this query optimizes. So that query is processed with the two types like query time and compile time as well as run time. So here what we are going to construct a query. So the select employee name from employee where salary greater than 10,000. Where salary greater than 10,000 is the query. So this query, how it evaluates, how it optimizes, how it validates. So the problem here is that DBMS won't understand this statement directly. So after writing this query directly, the DBMS won't understand this statement. So for that, we have SQL queries, structured query language queries. So we have SQL. So we have SQL structured query languages queries. So SQL being a high level language makes it easier not just for the users to query data based on their needs, but also it bridges the communication gap between the DBMS, which does not really understand a human language. So, which does not understand a human language, it maintains a communication between those two. So, the compiler as well as user. So, it maintains the bridges, it maintains the communication between those two, either compiler, DBMS compiler, or a human, for them to understand and execute a query. For them to understand and execute a query, they first need to be converted. They first need to be converted to a low level language. So that what we are written, the previous query is a high level language, and the first need to be converted into low level language. The SQL queries go through a processing unit. So it go through a processing unit, and that converts them into low level language via relational algebra in DBMS. So it converts that high level language into low level language because the system not understanding high level language. So the user writing that query is to be understood by the compiler within the low level language. So that low level language via relational algebra. Since relational algebra queries are a bit more complex than SQL queries. So writing a relational algebra queries are a bit more complex than SQL queries. So DBMS expects the user to write only the SQL queries. So DBMS compiler expects that what the user to write only the SQL queries. It then processes the query before evaluating it. So how it takes. So the query what we are writing is a high level query, but the query compiler it converts into low level language by doing this all the processes. What query compiler takes all these phases like what lexical analysis, syntactic analysis, and semantic analysis, and query optimization. So what are those phases? Compiler place takes lexical analysis, syntactic analysis, semantic analysis, query optimization. After doing this all with the help of this compiler, only the runtime system will execute. And displays the result. So this is the query applied here is high level query. The query which is written by user, and that high level query does not understand by the DBMS compiler. So what the DBMS query compiler do? So query compiler converts that high level language into low level language. It converts the low level language by processing what? So this is what all the process is called as processing, validating, optimization of the query. So this is all what the compiler is doing is called as query processing. So after query processing, the query is going to be takes second phase, that is runtime phase. So now the query evaluated and the result is also displayed here. Result displays here. So this is all stored into the DBMS database also. So database will takes place to display all the result here. So this is the way how the query is processing here. So how it actually takes place. So query processing in DBMS. So query compiler takes place. Then next it takes to execute query plan, and then next it takes to execute query optimization. So that means query should be reduced. to reduce the size of the query, it optimizes the query. Whichever are not necessary inside of the query will be removed. And the next, catalog manager. Catalog manager will takes place to display the system catalogs. Now here the query optimization takes place. At this moment, query execution plan. Query after optimization of the query execution will takes place. Query execution will takes place, so that the executor query processor will be processed this execution plan. So now the execution plan will be taken by the command processor, and the command processor will interact with the data manager. So this is the command, and you want to display the record, you want to give the result as per this command. So like the way it informed to the data manager. Now data manager will help to the command processor to give that result, and this command processor gives to displays the query result here, displays the query result here. So like the way query processing will happen in the DBMS. So what are the phases takes place here? So this is all about the compilation phases. So before compilation, the query should be processed, optimized and validated. So after validated, after optimized, after processed only, it takes place to execute the query. It takes place to execute the query. So now command processor will takes the query which is ready to be executed and checks all the commands are clear, all the commands are written clear or not, and inform it to the data manager. Based on the commands you are going to give the response to this command processor. Now data manager given the response as per that command processor, and it takes to display here. Query result will be displays here. So this is the way the compilation phase. So compile time phase, and runtime phase. So in the compile time phase takes place what? It takes the processing. It takes the processing phase as well as validating the phase, as well as optimizing the phase. So these three phases are included in the compilation phase. So in that compilation, query compiler will take place, query plan will executed, query optimizer will be executed. Now coming to the runtime phase, query execution plan will takes place, and the next command processor will takes place to interacting. Command processor will takes place to interact with the data manager. Then next query result will be displayed. So based on the interaction of both command processor and data manager, the query result will be displayed. So this is all the process which happens to processing, optimizing and validating the query inside of the query evaluation. So once again we'll see here query plan. So query plan will takes place. How it takes actually? It takes it parses and translate the query. And it converts into the relational algebraic expression. So how this plan will be executed, how the query will be processed, how the query will be optimized means the query will be taken by the query plan, and this query plan is going to be parsing and translating the query into relational algebra expression. And this taken relational algebra expression will be optimized by this execution plan, and it gives to the evaluation engine. Query evaluation engine. It gives to the query evaluation engine. So here we have to use that syntactic process, lexical analyzer and parser. These are all for only for only parsing and translating the queries. For only parsing and translating the queries into relational algebraic expression. Into relational algebraic expression. So, relational algebraic operations are what? Selection operation, projection operation, union operation, intersection operation. Like that, different types of operations will be executed or evaluated to this optimized query. Now the optimized query will be executed here, and this execution plan will be evaluated by this evaluation engine. So now after evaluating that query with the help of both command processor and data manager, it displays the query output. So this is the way of we have to understand the query processing will be happen in the DBMS. So as I mentioned in the previous diagrams, so query processing can be divided into compile time and runtime phases. As we said all this in the previous one. So it is divided into both compile time and runtime. So compile time phase includes what? One is parsing and translation. That is nothing but query compilation. Parsing and translation. And the second one, query optimization. And third one, evaluation. So that is nothing but code generation. So evaluation is nothing but what? Code generation. So first one, parsing and translation. That is nothing but query compilation. And then next, query optimization. So one is what? Query compilation, and next query optimization, and next code generation. So in the runtime phase, the database engine is primarily responsible for interpreting and executing the hence generated query with the physical operators and delivering the query output. So after doing all these phases, compile time phases and runtime phases only, we can understand that the query is evaluated based on the compile time phase and runtime phase to display the result. So here parsing and translation. What is meant by parsing and translation? So the first step in query processing is what? Parsing and translation. Here the fired queries undergo lexical, syntactic and semantic analysis. So the fired queries are nothing but whatever the queries you are written for the result, will go for lexical, syntactic and semantic analysis purpose. So lexical, syntactic and semantic analysis means the unnecessary syntaxes, unnecessary symbols has to be removed from this query. Essentially, the query gets broken down into different tokens and white spaces and removed along with the comments is called as what? Lexical analysis. So removing or broken down into different tokens and white spaces and are all removed. That is all called as lexical analysis. In the next step, the query gets checked for the correctness. So both syntax wise as well as semantics wise. So the query gets checked for the correctness both syntax wise and semantic wise. The query processor first checks the query if the rules of SQL have been correctly followed or not. So that shows that what? Syntactic analysis. So the query processor first checks that the query if the rules of SQL have been correctly followed or not. So finally, the query processor checks if the meaning of the query is right or not. So it checks the rules of SQL have been implemented or not. And the next, the query processor checks the meaning of the query is right or not. So things like if the table mentioned in the query are present in the DB or not. So presented database or not, presented table or not. If the columns referred from all the tables are actually present in them or not. So all the tables are presented, all the columns are presented or not. So that is all in semantic analysis. Once the above mentioned check all the process, like what? So broken down into pieces, broken down into tokens, lexical analysis, has to be checked. The next semantic wise it has to be checked, and syntactic analysis wise it has to check, and the database also has to check, and everywhere it has to check for the pauses, checks for the tests. So semantic analysis it has to check, syntactic analysis it has to check, lexical analysis it has to check. For all these checks, for all these test cases, it pauses, then the query processing will be done. So the flow moves to convert all the tokens into relational expressions, graphs and trees. Relational expressions, graphs and trees. So this makes the processing of the query easier for the other parsers. So this makes means applying parsing and translation, lexical analysis, syntax analysis, semantic analysis. All these will happen under tokens into relational expressions, graphs and trees, making this all the processing of the query easier for the other parsers. So let us consider the same query as an example and see how the flow will works. So here the query is what? So query is select employee underscore name from employee where salary greater than 10,000 is the query, is the SQL query which is in high level language. So what we already told that, so the query is to be evaluated by doing the processing of query optimization and query evaluation. So here the above query would be divided into the following tokens called as what? Select is one token, employee name is another token, from is one token, employee is one token, where salary greater than 10,000, all are separated, all are broken down into separate tokens. The token and hence the query get validated for the name of the queried table is looked into the data dictionary table also. So it verifies each and every thing. So whether select is a command or not, whether employee name is the column name or not, whether from is the command or not, whether employee is the table name or not, where is the command or everything will be checked by the syntactic and semantic analysis. The name of the columns mentioned employee name and salary in the tokens are validated for existence. So I like the way each and everything it has to be checked. So the type of columns being compared have to be of the same type. So salary and the value 10,000 should have the same data type. The next step is to translate the generated set of tokens into relational algebra query. So it has to be converted, it has to be translated, the generated set of tokens into relational algebra query. So these are easy to handle for the optimizer in further processes. So it is very easy for the optimizer to doing the process for the next step. So here this is the projection symbol. So relational algebra operations in this relational algebraic operator, relational algebra operation or operator. So employee name is the column name and sigma indicates that what the column name, and it has to be taken as a condition greater than 10,000. So relational graphs and trees can also be generated, but for the sake of simplicity, it has to be displays. So here query evaluation. So after doing all this, the query should be evaluated. So how it evaluated? Once the query processor has the above mentioned relational forms with it, the next step is to apply certain rules and algorithms. To generate a few powerful and efficient data structures. So these data structures help in constructing the query evaluation plans. This help you to constructing query evaluation plans. For example, if the relational graph was constructed, there could be multiple paths from source to destination. there is multiple paths from source to destination. So a query execution plan will be generated for each of the paths, for each of the path. So here we can see the query which is showing that what relational algebraic query, and here we are going to see what class name equal to design_01, and it will be displays like what class names we are going to display, and this is from class table. So where the student table and the class name equal to design1, and here also the student ID, student name, address, date of birth from the student table and the class table. So now the design, when he wants to display the query, the student information has to be displayed based on the class table, So this is the way the query evaluation process here. So as you seen in the previous possible graphs, one way could be first projecting followed by selection. First projection will be followed here in the right side. First projection will be followed by the selection. Then next another way would be to do selection followed by projection on the left side. So here selection is followed by projection. So selection is followed by projection. So this is selection is followed by projection, and here projection is followed by selection. So both those two are the selection and the projections are both relational operations. So the above sample query is kept simple and straightforward to ensure better comprehension, but in the case of joins and views, more such paths start to open up. So now the evaluation plans may also include different annotations referring to the algorithms to be used. So relational algebra which has annotations of these sort is known as evaluation primitives. So all the notations which we are applying during query evaluation, during query evaluation is called as what? Evaluation primitive. Evaluation primitives. So here query optimization. DBMS pick up the most efficient evaluation plan based on the cost each plan has. The aim here is to minimize the query evaluation time. So query optimization importance is what? To query reduce or minimize the query evaluation time. The optimizer also evaluate the usage of index present in the table and the columns being used. So index present in the table. Already we told that indexes are used to reduce the access time. It also finds out the best order of subqueries to be executed so as to ensure only the best plans gets executed. So some of the factors weighed in the optimizer to calculate the cost of query evaluation plan is, so some of the factors are weighted for the query optimization is what? CPU time. So how the CPU will be given the time to complete that process, complete to accessing, and the number of tuples to be scanned, and disk access time, and the number of operations that performed, number of read or write operations to be performed. So how much time it taken by the CPU and how much time it taken to the accessing of the disk, and the number of tuples to be scanned, number of operations to be completed. So this is all query optimization. So this is about to query optimization and query evaluation process. So once again we revise the topic which we discussed in this session. So here query processing and query evaluation. So how query processing? What is meant by query processing actually? So here it is the way of parsing the query. It is way of validating the query. It is way of optimizing the query before generating a low-level code understood by the DBMS. So that is nothing but to converting that low-level process we have to do some parsing techniques, validating techniques, optimization techniques. So here, this is the query which is in high level language, which you want to make it as a low level by doing this all the processes. So what are the query compiler phases will takes place. So both compile phases and runtime phases will takes place. So to do that compilation process, before that compilation process, what it takes place, lexical analysis will takes place, syntactic analysis will takes place, semantic analysis will takes place, and query optimization will takes place. So once all the phases are tested, all the phases are passed with the tests, then query result will be displayed. Query result will be displayed. The query result will be displayed by interacting with the command processor to the data manager. Command processor to the data manager. So how it parses and how it after parsing, how that gives the result in the relational algebraic expression, and how it optimization, and how that query will be evaluated by the evaluation engine. So here the compile time phases includes what? Parsing and the translation. That is nothing but query compilation. Second one, query optimization, and third one, code generation. So here the example we'll see here, the parsing and translation phases occurs. Lexical analysis, syntactic analysis, semantic analysis. After that only query optimization will takes place. So how it parses actually. So breaking down all the query into different tokens called as select, employee name, from, employee, and everyone. So after converting all these tokens, it has to checks by the dictionary table whether all the tokens are related to the database or not, or the related to the table or not, related to the columns or not. Everything it has to be checked. So after checking it, after testing it, only it is converting into the relational algebraic phase. It is converting into the relational algebraic phase. So that is symbol selection and projection symbols which are in relational algebra. So this is the way of query evaluation takes place. So here the selection is followed by selection, in projection will be followed by projection, and projection is followed by selection will takes place. And this is the way of query processing will takes place, evaluation primitives. So the main query optimization factors is CPU time and the number of tuples to be scanned, disk access time, and number of operations that has to be taken. So this is all about query processing and query evaluation. Thank you all.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.